Hi AP, so today we are going to be drawing another drawing of the brain. Today we're going to focus on the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. So we're actually going to be looking at some of the internal brain structures that you need to know for this unit. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start with the forebrain. Okay, so we're going to draw middle towards the bottom. We're going to draw a funky little shape, so watch me draw it first. Right, so it's going to look kind of like this. To start, I'm going to draw in purple at the top of the forebrain. I'm going to draw something that looks kind of like a football or an almond right up here. Okay, so this is called the thalamus. Alright, so the thalamus, and this is going to, in your notes, you're going to write this down. Okay, the thalamus is Grand Central Station, right? That means that there are two sides to the thalamus, a left and a right, and raw data from the body comes up the spinal cord through bottom-up processing. It comes up the spinal cord and goes to the thalamus. So the thalamus sends raw data left and right to the left and right hemispheres. Then it receives processed data and sends it back down to the body through top-down processing. So it goes back down this way. Alright, so the thalamus is really kind of like a switchboard, if you remember what switchboards are. So way back in the day, when phones were brand new, like telephones, not just cell phones, there were people who would basically receive a call and they had to transfer it to the right line. So they were switching the call and literally unplugging a cord and putting it in a different slot to send the message where it needed to go. So that's what's happening with the thalamus. It's getting information from the spinal cord and then it's going to send it to the right place. Alright, next I'm going to get a light green color and I'm going to draw right down here just a tiny small little dot. Okay, not super tiny, but a little dot. Right? And this right here is called the hypothalamus. Right? The hypothalamus, literally the word hypothalamus means below the thalamus, and you'll notice it's below the thalamus, right? So hypothalamus, this is a collection of neurons that basically runs things like motivation, hunger, thirst, and life support systems, right? And the hypothalamus, as you can tell then, does a lot, right? It's very important. It has a lot going on. And so we joke in AP Psychology that if you get a multiple choice question about a brain part and you don't know what the answer is, but hypothalamus is a choice, pick the hypothalamus because it does so much that you're probably on the right track. We also talk about something called the 4 F's of the hypothalamus. So that's fight, flight, feeding, and fornication, or sexual motivation. Alright, so basically it has to do with a lot of your life support systems. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and in the corner of my drawing here, I'm going to go down to this bottom right corner, and I'm going to zoom in on the hypothalamus. So I'm going to draw a larger version of this. Let me scoot over. Just in the corner here. Because within the hypothalamus, there are two parts that I want you to know that are going to come up again in our unit on motivation and emotion. So the first one is, I'm going to use a darker green, and we're going to make this shape because it's on the side of the hypothalamus. So this is called the lateral hypothalamus, or LH. Okay, and I'm abbreviating. Then I'm going to use a blue, and at the bottom, I'm going to draw a half circle because it's on the bottom, and I'll label it VMH. That stands for ventromedial hypothalamus. Right, so the ventromedial hypothalamus is on the bottom, right? So remember from yesterday's drawing how we learned that the bottom is called ventral, the ventral area. Okay, so this is at the bottom of the hypothalamus. Now, the lateral versus the ventromedial hypothalamus, they have different roles. The lateral hypothalamus tells your brain to start eating if you're hungry. So when your body needs energy, it's going to tell your brain to start eating. So we sometimes remember this by LH equals large hunger. It makes you hungry. Then the ventromedial is going to do the opposite. It's going to tell you to stop eating when you're full. It's going to say, hey, we're good now. You don't need any more. Right? So in other words, it tells you when you are satiated. Okay? So satiety is the state of being full, right? That you're not hungry anymore. Okay, so this is what's going on within this little tiny green dot right here. All right, let's go back to our larger drawing now. So we're going to start at the top here by the thalamus on top of our forebrain. We're going to draw a little S coming off the top here. So I'm going to go like this. Make a little S. And you can color that in. All right, this is a very important part called the hippocampus. So think like a hippo on campus. And the hippocampus, first of all, the word hippocampus means seahorse. So it looks kind of like a little seahorse, if you know what those look like. And that's why it's called that. But basically, the hippocampus is the memory processing center. So it is run mainly by the neurotransmitter ACH, which, if you remember, is acetylcholine. All right, so this handles memory. And what it does is the hippocampus sends information that it has processed to the cortex to be stored. So memory is processed by the hippocampus and it's stored in the cortex. And one way we remember this is that you would not forget if a hippo was on campus, right? If we saw a hippo in the courtyard at MacArthur High School, you would never forget it, right? So that's how I remember hippocampus is about memory. All right, next up, I'm going to take a dark blue and I'm going to draw a little button-looking thing on the end of the hippocampus. And this is called the amygdala. All right, the amygdala is the emotional processing center. And it's particularly involved in processing the emotions of rage and aggression. All right, so it's all about emotions, especially strong emotions like rage or fear. So my way of remembering this is I make up a fictional girl. My mom's name is Amy, so I named her Amy G. Dalla, or Amy Gadalla, as my former student likes to say. Sorry, I messed up my Amy. Okay, so I always say, don't mess with Amy Gadalla. That girl crazy. She's emotional. Or I say, oh, poor Amy Gadalla, she's so emotional. You know, she's just having a hard time. Okay, and we can all relate to that. All right, so that is all the forebrain. Okay, now we're going to switch to the midbrain. We're going to start, I'm going to use a light blue color. We're going to go down to the midbrain here. Okay, so the forebrain is all up here. Midbrain is going to be down here. So we're going to go where these little bumps are. We're going to draw a little, kind of like a lima bean shape, tucked into that bottom lump. You like all this phrasing. Okay, this guy right here is called the medulla oblongata. Medulla means middle part. Oblong is because of the shape. And this controls your respiration and your heart rate. So it's very important, right? Breathing and heartbeat, essential to life. All right, next I'm going to get a red marker and I'm going to draw, coming out of that So overlapping a little bit, we're going to draw a small rectangular kind of thing. Right? And this is called the RAS, which stands for the Reticular Activating System, or the reticular formation. And I'm going to actually, in here, I'm going to draw some cross hatches. It's an art term. Because it's kind of like a fishnet type structure. It resembles fishnet. So this is the center of the reticular activating system, is the reticular formation. And this is what we call the startle center. So this is where this activates and it kicks your body into gear. It arouses you. It's what wakes you up. So when I try to remember the reticular activating system, I think of RAS stands for reticular activating system. It also stands for rise and shine. Right? So wake up, rise and shine. That's our RAS. Right? Now I'm going to get an orange and we're going to draw a little guy that's kind of wrapping around this whole section here. So I'm going to start over here on the right, and I'm going to draw kind of like a donut going around the midbrain here. Okay, and we'll color that in. Okay, this is called the pons, P-O-N-S. And the pons, the word pons means bridge, and it is a bridge from the back to the front. It takes information from the back of the brain, from the back of the midbrain to the front. Okay, now we're going to switch to the hindbrain. Okay, and the hindbrain is in the back here. Right, so we are going to draw, I'm going to use a dark pink magenta color, and we're going to draw a little circle-ish thing down here at the bottom. Okay, and then I'm going to kind of color that in. And this is called the cerebellum. Right, the cerebellum. Cerebellum is a word that literally means, it sounds kind of like cerebrum, right? So it means little brain. And that is basically because it looks like a little brain, right? It's a small little brain in the back of your brain. So this controls your balance, posture,